Hi, I'm Rob Garland, and in this lesson we're going to unlock the CAGED. I'm going to give you an outline of the CAGED system, and we're going to focus in on dominant seventh chords because those are the chords that are used mostly in the blues. So, what is the CAGED system? If we take the word CAGED, C, A, G, E, D, and we think of each of those letters as a chord, an open chord, it gives us the ability to move those shapes up and down the neck and play the same chord in all 12 keys. For example, if I play a C chord here using the open chord shape of C, and I want to transfer this chord up the neck, all I've got to do is think about what the shape is and where my open strings are. And if I move that chord up the neck to, say, the 10th fret, I'm now going to be playing a G chord using a C shape. It's the equivalent of putting a capo on the guitar, moving it up. Just in this case, for the C shape, my first finger is the capo. Okay, now you've already done this probably without realizing it. For example, with the E shape, because I'm sure you're probably aware of this big bar chord shape for major chords. Okay, basically when you play this chord here, a B or an A or a G or an F or an E, you're taking this E shape, part of the word CAGED, and moving it up the neck and playing the chord. The root corresponds to the bass note of your chord. So in this case, the E chord's root is an open E string. As we move up the neck, whatever note we're playing on the open E string gives us our chord. Now, anything we do to these open chords in the open position, we can also do to our CAGED chords. So if we were going to take an E major chord and make it minor by removing our first finger, if we go up the neck with our E shape and play, let's say, an A major chord, remove the same finger, it becomes A minor. So anything you do in the open position, you can do as a movable CAGED chord. This is very important. Now, some of these CAGED chords lend themselves well to movement, and some of them are a little bit of finger gymnastics. And part of the reason why CAGED chords work so well is that you don't actually have to play all 6 strings. That C chord shape I was playing earlier, that I played as a G chord up here at the 10th fret, I could play that on just the middle 3 strings, and that would still be a G chord. I could play it on just the top 3 strings, and that would still be a G chord. So the CAGED system has a lot of dynamic harmonic possibilities in it, because you can take a whole song and play it in one area of the neck, keeping your chords on just 3 strings. Now, what has this got to do with the blues? Well, when we think about blues, most blues shuffles use dominant 7th chords. Even those blues shuffles that go, the harmony underneath that is a dominant 7th chord. So what I'd like to start by doing in this course is take you through the dominant 7th chord as CAGED shapes. Okay, so let's go and start with an open C chord. Now, a C chord is made of the notes C, E, and G, the root, the 3rd, and the 5th of the major scale. How do we make it into C7? We add a flattened 7th. Flattened 7th is the 7th note of the scale, flattened. All right, the 7th note of the scale of C major is a B. If we flatten it, we get B flat. So we take our C triad in the open position and we add a B flat, which I'm going to add here on the 3rd fret of the G string. And there's my C7 chord. Now this is the first of the CAGED dominant 7th chords, C7. Now what I can do with this is move it anywhere. If I wanted to take it up to, say, the 7th fret, kind of sounds like Born on the Bayou. That's now an E7 using a C7 CAGED shape. Maybe I'll take the chord down to the 5th fret. There's a D7. Why is it D7? Because my bass note on the 5th fret, the root note, is a D, and the shape is that of a C7. Okay? So we can play this C7 chord and we can move it up and down the neck and play all 12 dominant 7 chords with it, okay? If we also want to play this chord on other strings, we can as well. Instead of playing it on, starting on the A string, I'll move down to the D, G, B, E strings. That's also still C7. Now I'm going to talk more about how that's an inversion in a second, but first I just want to go through the shapes. So there's C7, C7, okay? That's the caged C7 shape. All right, if we think of the word caged, C, A. So the next shape is an A shape. Now this is one, again, you've probably already played as a major chord. If you think of A down here, or perhaps the rock A, as it's known, if we move that up, we can play a C chord using an A shape. Some people like to use their pinky for that. Some people like to use their third. Okay, the A chord in the open position is moved up and we get C. Likewise, we could get D or E or wherever we want to move it. The bass note is on the A string. The root note on the A string is telling you what your chord is. So there's a C major chord played in a caged A shape. How do we make that into a dominant 7? We got to add that B flat note. Okay, and you can put that note in there as well if you want to. That's the 5th, which we've already got in the chord here. So this is a C7 chord based out of an A7 shape. If you think about the A major chord in the open position and you play it as an A7, which is this, that's now movable. A7, A sharp 7, B7, C7, D7, E7, and so on. You get the point, right? C7 played with an A7 cage shape. If we want to play that on just the middle 3 strings, maybe we just want to play that on 4 strings. It's all C7. Okay, so we had our C7 shape, our A7 shape. Next, we need our G7 shape. Now, this one's a little bit tricky. How do we play G7 in the open position? Well, there's our G, and then, sounds like Desperado, there's G7, okay? Now, that's a tough one to reach for. You could play it like this, which kind of looks like the C7 shape, right? And that is just on the low 4 strings. But this open cage G7, when moved up, really looks like this. So what am I doing there? Well, I'm reaching across and I'm playing the C bass note on the low E string because a G7 chord has its bass note on the low E string. And then I'm barring my first finger across the 5th fret and picking up the 7, B flat, on the 6th fret of the high E string. Now I could put the 3rd of the chord in here with my 3rd finger on the 7th fret of the A string, but that note's an E and I'm already playing it here. So why give myself the stress of trying to bend my finger that way? I'm just going to do this. So this finger is muting the A string and I'm getting a nice clean bass note with the top part of the chord. And that's the part of the chord I really need. That's the part that makes it sound like C7. It has a real bluesy quality, which is handy as we're talking about the blues. Okay, so we had C7, C7 shape, C7, A7 shape, and now we just did C7, G7 shape. All right, let's go through our word caged. It's kind of like a spelling test as well. C-A-G-E. All right, next one is E7. How do we play E7 in the open position? Well, we lift up the D string like that, and we have E7. So that shape, rather similar to E major, can now be moved up all the way up to C. My bass note is at the 8th fret on the low E string. And there's a C7. Now, this is a commonly played dominant 7th voicing for blues. It sounds okay. So I like to play the E7 shape in a slightly tighter sounding voicing by removing the A string and the high E string like this. So I'm using my index finger to play the C, and then we're muting the A string by leaning that index finger over, and then we have the 7th B flat on the D string with my 2nd finger. The pinky is picking up the 3rd of the chord E on the G string, and then my 3rd finger is picking up the note G, the fifth. So we're not doubling those notes here. And it has a bit of a tighter sound than if I was to play it like that, right? So that's still the E7 shape C7 chord. Now there are other variations on this. So if we play this C7 chord with the E7 shape on just the middle three strings, it lends itself to all these cool little embellishments like those kind of rhythmic ideas where we're hammering on the minor third to the major third. Also, more maybe thinking more like an organ trio kind of sound. If we just play the low E string, D and G, that's the root, the seventh, and the third of the chord. All these different sounds, or perhaps like putting the seven on the top. All these different sounds are hiding inside this big E7 shape. It's just a case of tracking them down. You could also play on just the top four strings. It's still a C7 based out of an E7 shape with the seventh as the lowest note. So, as you'll see as we work through the course, a big part of this is being able to spot these little string groups quickly. So we have a C7 shape, an A7 shape, we have a G7 shape, an E7 shape. What's left? A D7 shape. All right, well, think about open D7. All right, when we play this open D7, our bass note is the open D string, but as we like with the C shape, as we move some shapes up, we have to allow for the open strings. So if we do that, we need to fret the bass note on the D string, and that would give us a C7 with a D7 shape. This one's probably familiar to some blues fans because it's the Red House shape, in a different key. So that's a D7 shape, okay? So C7, when you're playing a song and you need a C7 chord, you should now at least be able to play it here, 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 and here. And when we come to practice this in a minute, we're going to do that with the metronome to really get these shapes under your fingers. Let me just say a word or two about inversions as well. I found with these CAGED shapes over the years, playing them in lots of different contexts, being able to play these chords on the top four strings is one of the most useful things you can do to have as part of your rhythm guitar arsenal. Okay, so if we just think about what those chords would look like, if we take this C7, the C7 shape, and we play it on just the top four strings, that's actually called a first inversion of C7. What does that mean? A first inversion means if you take the four notes that are in a C7 chord, C, E, G, and B flat, the third of the chord, E, is now the lowest note. And if we go through the notes in the chord, E, B flat, C, G. So that's a first inversion of C. This is a good kind of funky. And great if you're playing some kind of like R&B blues where you just need some little hits now and again. Great chank kind of sound comes out of that chord voicing. So that's a first inversion C7 based out of a C7 shape. Okay. Now, the A7 shape really sits in the same register. So I'm going to move to the G7 shape. And with these root and inversion chords on the top four strings, there's usually a good set of four that I like to use. So that's the first one. Second one is exactly what it looks like. The G7 CAGED shape played on just the top four strings. As we're only playing it on the top four strings, we don't need to worry about having this pinky involved. We're just gonna play those top four strings. Now, what I might do, if it was a shuffle, I might lean my thumb over the top, over the E and A strings to mute those strings so that I can dig in to the meat of the chord and get each of those notes ringing. So and the thing I like about this voicing for blues particularly is your 7 is on the top there, and you can give it a little juice, give it a little half, quarter step bend in there. make it come alive, right? So in terms of what this chord is, it's a second inversion. Remember, we had C, E, G, and B flat. In this chord, G, the fifth of the chord, is the lowest note. So we had a first inversion, C7, E in the bass. Now we have a second inversion, C7, G in the bass. All right, next one. Think about that E7 shape that I was saying has all sorts of possibilities, like the organ trio sound and the little embellishments. This one's great if you just play top 4 strings. Nice funky sound. And the lowest note in the bass now is the 7th, B flat. So that becomes a third inversion. Okay? First inversion, second inversion, third inversion. And you can hear they're going up, right? You can hear this bass note going up each time. This is super handy if you're playing on a blues and you've got 4 bars of a C7. Instead of just sitting on one, you can move between them. If it's like a funky vamp or something, you really want to take advantage of that. And then the fourth shape is the root shape, which is based out of our D7 CAGED shape, and it's the root shape because C is the lowest note in the chord. All right, so root, third inversion, second inversion, first inversion, okay? All of those would fit over a C7 chord. All right, so we have our root and 3 inversions on the top 4 strings, and then we have our 5 CAGED shapes, C7 shape, A7 shape, G7 shape, E7 shape, and D7 shape, 5 different C7s based out of the CAGED shape. What we're going to do next is we're going to practice playing these 5 CAGED shapes and then the root and 3 inversions along with a metronome, just to get you used to switching between the chords and seeing where they are on the fretboard. So let's do that.